Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about weak point training and how to kind of determine if you need to use an isolation movement or a compound movement to bring up that weak point. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright, when we talk about weak points, this can apply to a lot of different people. Different people have different goals. Weak points could be aesthetic, meaning they could be a weak point in how you look, and that's something that you want to work on, or they could be a weak point in your performance in some way, some sport-specific thing, one of your other lifts. And so we get into the question of how do we identify them. And honestly, identifying them isn't as difficult as you might think. And a lot of times you use very similar methods to do so. Alright, so how do you tell if you have an aesthetic weak point? Go pull any of the classic bodybuilders. Go pull any classic bodybuilders from the 50s or 60s. Look at their overall physiques, the golden era physiques. The guys with the Apollyon type physiques. I don't care whether it's, if you take someone as extreme as Bill Pearl or Reg Park, they were bigger than a lot of those guys. Or you could take guys like Steve Reeves or Marvin Elder, any of those guys. There's different 3D photos. You can see them. Take photos of yourself. See how your proportions compared to theirs, because if you're trying to look better, the only way to look better is to obtain the classic look, because modern bodybuilding doesn't look good. No one's going to think it looks aesthetic, so you need to go with something that looks aesthetic if you're chasing aesthetics. And don't worry about the modern stuff, because a lot of that, they use so much side enhancement and stuff, you'll never get those proportions through weight training. They're using all sorts of injections and everything into those muscles that you may not want to do. So you could look at those different guys and look at them and compare to you. Now obviously they might be quite a bit bigger than you, and if they're a lot bigger than you, then you don't have weak points, meaning you don't have a foundation. So noobs come in and they want a weak point train, and it's like you need to train everything. Your whole body's a weak point. Nothing needs a higher priority over anything else. Get in and train everything on a hard progressive overload program that works every muscle in your body. Your weak points will come out later, because weak points are oftentimes genetic, in that if several people train on a balanced program, different people are going to have some muscles due to their frame, their structure, muscle fiber distribution, all sorts of stuff. They're going to grow a little faster than others, all right? Or they're going to portion out over their frame different than others, because people have different sized bones and different shape bone structures. So you could look at those guys, though, if you've been training at least a year, and figure out where you're at. If you have 2 or more muscles that can be worked by a compound movement that seem to be lagging behind in proportion compared to those guys, you don't need isolation movements for that. And here's what I mean. If you look at them and, okay, your biceps and your lats are lagging behind in proportion. Like let's say your pecs, your triceps, your delts are all in proportion to those guys, closer to their size, and maybe your biceps and your latissimus dorsi, your lats, your back are lagging. Would you need to do multiple exercises for that? No. You probably just need to focus a lot more on something like chin-ups. Chin-ups are one of the best bicep builders. They're one of the best lat builders. You can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The purpose of an isolation movement is not that isolation movements cause a muscle to grow faster. Anyone who thinks curls will make your biceps grow faster than chin-ups hasn't looked at any of the data. They don't know what they're talking about, and quite frankly, I would be leery of what they have to say if someone tells you that. All right, I'd be very, very careful of that. So that being said, the purpose of an isolation movement is when you have one muscle or a couple of muscles in different places of the body that you can't train with one big compound. That you can't train with one, so therefore you need to isolate a muscle so that it gets ahead and gets more stimulation than the other muscles in your body. It might be your calves and your biceps, and then everything else is proportionate, in which case you're probably going to need 2 different isolation movements. But if it's your bicep and your lats, why wouldn't you just put a much heavier focus on chin-ups? And what do I mean by a heavier focus? How about you do more sets of chin-ups than you do bench press, overhead press, squats, things like that. Do more sets of it every week. How about you prioritize it in your workout? Meaning, if you have something that's lagging, you should probably do it first every single time you go to the gym. And I do mean every time you go to the gym. I don't care what day it is. It's my leg day. It's my arm day. If your biceps and your back are lagging, then every day is bicep and back day. I don't care how you think you have it split up or for whatever reasons, that's probably the reason they're lagging. Do them first at every workout. First. That will fix your proportions real quick. If it's a single muscle, go ahead and isolate it. If it's just your biceps or just your triceps, but your delts and pecs and everything are big and your triceps are lagging behind, okay. Or if your delts are massive, your triceps are well developed, but your chest is lagging, okay. You might need to isolate your chest, do some flies. But if your chest and your triceps are lagging, you need to do a press. How about if your upper chest, your delts, and your triceps are lagging, one overhead press? That's what you need to put your focus on. In fact, most guys who want to be more aesthetic should probably put more focus on the overhead press in general anyways, right? I think most people agree with that who know how this works. So a lot of that just has to do with looking and seeing how many muscles you have that need to be caught up, and can you do them with a compound? Because you need to remember, a compound movement that works two muscles will give you just as much muscle growth as doing two different isolation movements there. Meaning if your chest and your triceps are lagging, you'll get more development for your gym time. You'll be more efficient with it if you just use something that works both to grow them together. Now, as far as performance goes, a weak link in your performance, same sort of idea. You know what? If you're disproportionately developed, you quite frankly, very possibly have a performance imbalance. Now, we could look at this from a full body perspective first, and then we'll look at it from individual muscles. I'm going to link a chart down below for you guys, a little set of charts, and that will give you an idea of where you stand as far as intermediate versus advanced versus elite on some of your big lifts. And if people are unsure what their maxes are, know what your 5 reps are. I promise most of you guys who are working on size and strength probably do as low as 5 rep sets. Take your 5 rep maxes, plug them into a 1 rep max calculator, and that will tell you where you're at. You know, if you can bench 220 for 5 reps, you should be able to plug that into a calculator and estimate your max to run in a chart. Well, that chart will give you a real good idea of where your performance balance lays from muscle to muscle. So that will tell you what you need to prioritize if you want well-balanced strength. Yeah, so if your squat is lagging way behind, if your squat is barely or almost intermediate, but your bench press is almost advanced, and your standing press is almost advanced, then odds are you need to work on your squat and your legs more. Right? This is another way to look at it. This could also apply to aesthetics to some extent, and the aesthetics could apply to strength to some extent. When you have obvious lagging muscles in your body that clearly are out of balance with the others, they're weak links that you're going to probably need to do some separate training in if you want to be balanced in your overall strength as any sort of strength athlete or any athlete who needs a strength component. But you could also look at that from the perspective of looking at the different lifts and seeing where you're at. Now, as far as when you figure out, okay, let's say my deadlift is my my weak link. Well, okay, if your deadlift's your weak link, figure out why it's your weak link. Is it your grip? If it's your grip, okay, you need to do more overall grip work. That's kind of one of the other things too. If your forearms are lagging aesthetically, you probably don't do enough pulling without straps. That's probably the #1 reason your forearms are lagging enough that you ever need to do extra work for them. Just throwing that out there. But let's say your deadlift's your weak link. Is it your grip? Then work on your grip more. Or look at your overall build. Is your back really well developed but your hamstrings are lagging? Do your hamstrings lag behind your quads? Your hamstrings lag in proportion to maybe your back development? Then you probably need extra hamstring work to bring your deadlift up. Are your glutes way underdeveloped but you have big hamstrings? Your glutes might need more work. Are your middle traps and all your erectors and even your lats maybe underdeveloped but you have massive legs? You probably need to be doing more rowing and chin-ups to help your deadlift. Alright, this is a pretty simple concept all the way around. And if you step back and think about it from that perspective and you're willing to analyze yourself both aesthetically and in terms of performance, it doesn't matter whether your goals are chasing a better looking physique or just better overall performance and strength. This will allow you to identify your weak links, where they are in your body, and kind of look at them and figure out, can I fix 2 or 3 of these weak links at the same time with one compound movement, or is it only one weak link in any given area that is going to need its own isolation work for me to get it caught up? And remember, generally speaking, compound movements are better for overall growth than isolation work is. Isolation work should really be reserved for those areas that are really and truly lagging behind, and they need extra direct work that isn't stimulating growth and other stuff because you're scared other stuff will grow. And it never makes sense to isolate 2 or 3 different muscles that you want to grow that could grow just as easily off of more focus on a compound. It just doesn't make sense because you could get all of them growing just by doing more work on one big exercise, and that will actually do more for you in the long term. So that's kind of the difference in figuring out when you need an isolation movement or not. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.